After years of trials and attempts at being virtuous and standing for what is deemed to be noble and brave, a Tyrant was born. August 23, 2020, a match ensued between The Fiend and Braun Strowman for the Universal title. The match ends, The Fiend is declared the victor. Suddenly, Roman Reigns marches into the ring, with a look in his eyes that was never seen before. Long gone the brave-inducing stare, and in came the menacing gaze. And his famous vest that yearned for yesteryears is also gone, and in its place came, wreck everyone and leave, which he did. If only people knew the true extent and magnitude of this event and what would to come of a ruthless, merciless 4-year reign and counting. This is the story of a man who was rejected by the masses time and time again, only for him to stop asking and instead take everything. This is the Tyrant that rules WWE. Through history, we find that every tyrant and dictator needed a diplomat by their side, a spokesperson, a personal advisor to medicate and spew out the ideals of said tyrant. And if one shall look into the panels of professional wrestling history, they shall not find a better candidate than
My name is Paul Heyman!
A man who was notorious for his devious wit and charm. A man with the capability of convincing the masses that atrocities were mere inevitabilities. Not to mention, he has years of experience working in said position, being the advocate for another monster before, named Brock Lesnar. Thus, he was added to what was deemed later on as the Island of Relevancy. Yet, ideals and visions can only propagate so much among the general public before they're stripped naked to their true essence, being fraudulent. The Tyrant needed concrete, tangible success to truly cement his way as the undeniable. Hence, a victory at Payback was indeed a must. And when the dust settled, Roman Reigns emerged as the new Universal Champion. The Tyrant knew that the course that he's about to undergo is not an easy one, and for him to continue his reign he needed an army of loyal men who would dive headfirst to save their dear leader. And nothing is thicker than blood. Consequently, he sought after his cousins, Jay and Jimmy, with the promise of a brighter future for each and even perhaps the possibility that they could become his heir. However, Jay was reluctant at first, citing issues of the way Roman Reigns conducted himself. Which then, Roman Reigns, much like how he handled the rejection from the audience, has met that reluctancy with pure force, beating his own cousin twice, culminating at a match in Hell in a Cell where Jimmy had to intervene to stop the bloodbath Roman was issuing to Jay. And from that moment, both Jay and Jimmy fell in line. It was through said instance we became aware of what type of a leader Roman is. A feared and ruthless marshal who wouldn't accept anything but the complete obedience to his own agendas, with a twisted mindset almost sadistic to the way he'd convince his own family that it was all a necessity to maintain the status quo, that his principles and visions are the only way and any other way must always fail, and if not, it must be forced to do so. Perhaps in a way Roman was speaking of past trauma, when his previous method failed miserably. After that, the Bloodline was formed, and what came next was a death row of challengers to the throne that is now called the Tribal Chief. The likes of Bryan Danielson, Edge, John Cena, the Demon Finn Balor, and Goldberg, just to mention a few. Heavy weighed the crown that was bestowed upon the head of the table. What started as blurry and ambiguous became crystal clear, that he is ought to reign as we ought to witness. Nevertheless, a new challenger like no other emerged. Who instigated the first cracks of the empire by implying that the special advisor Paul Heyman knew of his return at SummerSlam. Nevertheless, the match was announced that it would be Roman versus Brock at Crown Jewel, which Roman won with the help of his loyal army, only to see Lesnar in the coming weeks angry and frustrated of the Usos' interference, landing him an indefinite suspension, only to come back and win the WWE Championship. And in the meantime, Roman Reigns grew ever more weary and paranoid of his special advisor, reaching a peak on the 17th of December episode of SmackDown where he officially parted ways with Paul Heyman in the only way he knew how: violence. And as the final blow was about to be laid, in came Brock to save his advocate. Brock and Heyman were reunited at last. Or did they? As then Brock was challenged by Bobby Lashley at the Royal Rumble for the WWE Championship, which saw Roman costing him the title with the help of the special advisor. Unlike the other challengers who would have succumbed to such predicament, Brock went on in the same night to win the Royal Rumble and managed to win back his WWE Championship at the Elimination Chamber, setting his eyes laser focused for revenge against the Tribal Chief. Thus it was done. WrestleMania 38, Brock vs. Roman, winner takes all, which saw the Tyrant reaching levels no one's soul dared to see as he marched out of WrestleMania undisputed. A subsequent match between the pair followed SummerSlam, which saw Reigns continue his pompous reign, putting a definitive end to his last true challenger to the throne. The Tyrant seemed, at least for now, the constant to all change. Throughout the history of ruthless dictatorships, humanity saw the rise of a new kind of people, a kind that uses set totalitarian rule to their own game. One could call them opportunistic. And for the Bloodline, that breed was personified in Sami Zayn, a man whose many accounts was the laughing stock of the locker room, who saw an opportunity to align themselves with the island of relevancy. At first, the ever more skeptical Roman refuted such attempt, only to fall for the slick words of Sami, but not Jay, as he saw Sami as an intruder and a threat to the Empire. Nevertheless, with actions that can only be viewed as pure loyalty and adherence to the cause of the Bloodline, Jay accepted Sami as the honorary Uce, and with that, the Bloodline grew ever more stronger. All the while, a tank was being groomed down in NXT to be prepared to serve the head of the table, awaiting the perfect moment to strike in the name of the Tyrant. And by Clash at the Castle, when Drew faced Roman and had him where he desired, that moment came. And Solo Sikoa has entered the ranks of the loyal army. There stood the empire Roman has constructed, an army made up of men who see blood and have an unmatched desire to be the first to deliver, all in the name of their dear leader, a man who holds the entire professional wrestling in his own palm, doing with it as he pleases. It is believed that many of the large empires that ruled the world have met their demise not merely due to outside interference, but rather it is largely a crumbling that started from the inside. And for the Bloodline, that was Sami Zayn, the man who sought out to selfishly indulge themselves in the Bloodline for fame and success, only to realize the extent of atrocities he had inflicted on others, growing more fearful of the decision to join such merciless empire in the very first place, terrified that such notions and thoughts could find their way to the Tyrant, which he would certainly won't take lightly. Sami Zayn became ever more apprehensive toward the martial orders given by the Tribal Chief, reaching a point in the Royal Rumble where Sami was instructed to deliver the final blow to his former best friend Kevin Owens. In that moment, Sami's fear became courage, as he delivered the final blow, but not to Kevin Owens. The chair shot heard around the world was the first true crack in the empire Roman had constructed for the last 3 years. A crack that sent ripples across all the ranks of the Bloodline, but none more than Jay, who sat there baffled and perplexed. Perhaps that chair shot has opened his mind to the past, where he was the one revolting against the Tyrant. Sami Zayn was out of the Bloodline. In the coming weeks, Sami's anti-Roman rhetoric continued, culminating in a match in his own hometown at the Elimination Chamber, where he had Roman defeated, yet Jimmy intervened. Despite that, Sami kicked out, only to then see Roman hand the ever more confused Jay a chair, asking him to deliver the final blow to Sami, who refused, only then to see Roman spear Sami to retain. with Kevin Owens coming out after the match officially acknowledging that Sami and Kevin are back. Jay after that cleared all the confusion that he had about Sami when he delivered a super kick to Sami on March 6th episode of Raw, proving that the blood in the bloodline goes deep. Thus it was set the Undisputed Tag Championship match at WrestleMania, which marked a tag team match main eventing WrestleMania, a milestone in its own, leaving one question to be answered: who is Roman's challenger at the Showcase of the Immortals? That insurmountable task was laid out for the exiled prince, the revolutionist, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. As on the same night that Sami laid the foundation of the collapse, Cody won the Royal Rumble, earning himself a shot at the Tyrant. And as the first night of WrestleMania concluded, the Empire lost the tag team gold, further implying that we may finally witness the end of this authoritarian regime. Cody then transcended the title of merely being a challenger and became Hope. Hope to see a different reality than the one we currently occupy. Yet, oftentimes, hope is just that, a futile attempt at visualizing what is not present, as Cody Rhodes lost to the Tyrant. After the match, Cody sat there with a look that personified all the emotions and feelings that took over the 80,000 people who were in attendance. They, more than anyone else, knew that this was the closest anyone could get to tumble down the throne that Roman sat on. It was done. Roman truly reigns. Despite that, it appeared that said attempt wasn't completely insignificant, as the Usos losing their titles set about a course of events that saw Roman becoming more hinged and discontent, as in his eyes this close call shouldn't have happened in the first place, and ordered Jay and Jimmy to retain their titles or else, which they failed to do so. Thus, Roman challenged for them by himself, accompanied by Solo, and when the night of Champions came, a familiar scene arrived. Roman was about to lose, and much like many times before, the Usos came to the rescue, but this time hoping to get back to the Tyrant's good side, only to fail and hit Solo instead, which infuriated the Tyrant ever more, launching a tantrum on them before Jimmy had enough and super kicked Roman. The cracks became full-blown dissolvement. The bloodline is imploding. Although Jay, the evermore thinker, had returned to his habit of confusion and disarray, only to come out making his stance clear, super kicking Roman, officially announcing the true beginning of the end of the Tyrant's empire. A subsequent match at Money in the Bank ensued, deemed as the Civil War of the Bloodline, which saw Roman pinned for the first time in 3 years. The Empire is reaching a tipping point of collapse. Although Jimmy was injured in the process, pinning Jay to finish what he had started 3 years ago. A match at SummerSlam was announced, Jay versus Roman for the undisputed title, and to finally see the Tyrant's empire fall. Yet, an outsider intervened, stopping Jay in his tracks, giving Roman the win. And this time, it was Jimmy. It appears that Jimmy's time in the Empire has filled him with unfathomable amounts of greed and hunger for power, that he wished not to see his brother topple the Tyrant and rather it be him. As a consequence, we arrive to now, where the Tyrant's empire, however broken it is, remains and his rule of merciless fury continues. It is truly unknown when we will witness the end of his regime, and at this point we know not of who shall have the honor to liberate the masses of the tyrant that rules WWE.